What this video is going to do is very rare. It's going to ask and answer the question that the legacy news stations have not even attempted to touch. This is probably going to be a video that is copied by many other channels. And while that does kind of get me a little antsy, a little at the same time, I think it's important that we approach it. What this video is going to do for you today, right now, is talk about when the Social Security Administration and its programs will likely be abandoned in their current form. And what I mean by that is a large change, a full hybridization, a full privatization, a full changeover to some other program. This is coming up because when I was talking with somebody on the phone, they used this word and it stuck with me. And I want to go into why that's relevant to this video. They said America, its government, was like a leech. And, when I think of a leech in my head, I think of farm leeches, farm stuff. You know what I mean? Like you go through water, it sticks to your skin, it pulls stuff out of you. It's a leech. Some other people look at leeches as like family members where they just keep taking and never give anything back. And they're not happy about that. And I get that. I get it. But here's the deal. I looked up the definition. A leech, in the form of reviewing it for the American government. A leech is an aquatic or terrestrial annelid worm with suckers at both ends. Many species are blood-sucking parasites, especially vertebrates and other predator types. And others are predators. Definition 2. A person who extorts profit from or sponges on others. There are leeches feeding off the hardworking majority. Now, what was interesting about this is that when the person proffered this idea that the government was a leech, he said, I know most people think Social Security is a leech, but the government is the real leech. And I thought about that because inside Social Security, there's a lot of programs. It's not just like one program. When people hear Social Security, they're like retirement, but that's wrong. It's all these different, tons of programs. You got ex-spousal benefits. You got, disabled adult child, but you got all these benefits all over the place that are all under the Social Security umbrella. So, what happens is the hardworking retired, the hardworking disabled, the hardworking, spousal, benefit type recipients, or maybe they weren't, you never know. They kind of look down on, in reality, the SSI people or the DAC people who have never really worked that much. They look down on them. I'm not trying to say that's right. I'm not trying to say that's wrong. It's just that's what they do. Okay. And what I realized is that people have this pre-existing notion that the SSI people are de facto falling into this category where they're sucking off of the other people. And in some regard, that is true because they didn't pay into the system or they didn't pay it enough. And as a result, they get a lot of money from general taxes to be able to survive. So I was thinking about this, and I had it inside my brain. I was considering all the options. And what I realized was that they weren't wrong. The United States government, the nation, requires human work product. All right, that's what if it made a sandwich out of human work product, that's what the politicians eat. That's what they suck their fingers on. That's where there's a good cooking. That's what they love, right? Got a little salt on it, a little fat to it. America, its politicians, they spend what we earn. They don't spend what they earn. They don't earn shit. They don't earn a drop in the bucket. They earn less than the SSI people usually do. Just let that sink in for a moment. I had to let it sink in for a moment too. The politicians, usually when it comes to doing jobs or whatever that, are supposed to work, create income. I don't mean investment income. We all know they know how to play that game. They know how to flop their bonds around and their stocks around and make big money. We all know they know how to Pelosi. We all know that. I'm talking about real income. These politicians, and you start to look at their history, their background, they're usually a bunch of failed lawyers. Or if they come from the House of Representatives, they got a lot of crimes attached to their name. I know because I was looking up some of them inside the PACER system because I got curious. Princess Diana, thank you for the $2 donation. She said, "Howdy, how are you tonight? I'm doing okay. Little tired, little worn out. I'm doing okay. But I've really started to take a different look at Social Security because, boy, it's just the way they sell it. They're selling it. They're Hollywooding it into our brains a certain way. And I want to break you out of that chain because it messed with my head. So here's the deal. They spend more than what we make. Because remember, they don't make money. Politicians don't make money. They don't have great investments inside the government. They just keep making shit investments inside the government. Hyper green energy, right? Oh boy, we've lost more money on green energy than many things that were poor investments. We need green energy. We need it. But it would appear that when our government allows investments to be creating these for-profit and nonprofit green energy companies, it would appear that the money seems to disappear or fail at a high percentage. So we know that these politicians, they don't make money. They spend our money. That's what they do. They spend our money. Now, they spend more of our money than what we make. You ever have that friend of yours that you keep lending money to? You keep lending money to? Well, they spend it like that. They're at the mall while you're working. They're putt-putt golfing while you're working. You give them money, it's gone. It's not for utilities. Maybe sometimes it is, but they blow your money. That's what the politicians are. They take our money, and they spend it, and then they demand more. And then, when they could not go ahead and get enough from us, they said, we are going to take a loan against America's future work product. Because the debt that they can take against us and our children and our children's children and our children's 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 future earnings, that taxes will be rendered against those future generations of human beings that we make. Social Security recipients are the opposite right now of what America is worried about, thinking about, loving. Because as we come into this tumultuous time with these tariffs, this potential war situation, you know, if you look at like war, famine, virus takeover, whatever, right now, the politicians, they don't want to really talk about Social Security. Because what does Social Security add to their ability to tax and spend? It's a cost. It's a cost they don't want to have to figure out and deal with. Now, I agree the government funds are paid out to recipients. And then those recipients, right, they pretty much, a lot of them, spend it immediately on food, utilities, rent, so on and on, which is good for the economy because the Social Security recipients, they get the money, they go to Walmart. They get the money, they go to ShopSave or any one of these grocery stores, right? Amazon, whatever. They got to buy their stuff. Rude Rabbit, thank you for the $5 donation. That's absolutely amazing. Let me put a heart on it. Very cool. I see many members got their badge upgraded. Yes, indeed. Congrats to all the people who got the badge upgrade. That's awesome. Very, very cool. So here's what I've realized with this situation. The Social Security recipients, these people, they only get attention when the voting machines are getting dusted off. You know what I mean? That's when people care who are politicians. Now, people just keep applying over and over for disability benefits, right? So this whole idea, just to kind of switch gears a little bit, that like Trump can make the Social Security system hyper efficient, is never going to be hyper efficient because the people who believe that they're disabled usually just keep applying over and over. So just keep stacking and building inside the system. Now, here's the thing. Biden did Trump a solid. Biden was such a disaster with the economy. And I know there's COVID and him having cancer and the auto pen thing and being present. I get it. Okay. I get it. But, let's be fair about this. Okay. We had 4 years of a disaster, which helps Trump because a lot of people that would normally right now be applying for Social Security benefits, they look at the monthly amount and they're like, I can't exist on that. I can't live on that. It financially doesn't make sense anymore to be on that. And because of us calculating it in another video, we now know that Biden's 4 years in cost of living adjustment increases are equivalent to 13 years with 3 other presidents. That's how bad it was. So the reality, and that's going directly backwards in time. You could pick other spots in history and it would be much, much longer. That's just going before Biden. So what I've kind of realized with this whole thing is that the relevancy of Social Security benefits by and through the Biden era Bidenomics has made Social Security benefits to some degree something that people are willing to abandon for something else. Because you go back 15 years, people wouldn't abandon it. People wouldn't even be on that train. You go back to 2010, you go back to 2005, you go back to 2000, people would not abandon it at all. They would fight left and right for it. 2025, a lot of people are like, hey, what's better than this? Because this sucks. All right. So, we got this situation. Biden helped people kind of get back to work, if you will. Because with the economy being so bad, people who would normally apply for benefits have been pushing to go back to work. It's a weird legacy considering his pre-White House website, but irony is irony. Yeah, Biden liked to advertise that he got people back to work. I don't think he wants to be known as the man who did it because he was a colossal failure with his economic policies, which caused the dollar to devalue significantly. I don't think that's what he wants, but we are where we are, right? Yeah, I'm a big fan of it is what it is. Utilitarian kind of person. Now, the weird thing that people won't say, but I'll say it. I'll be the asshole. I'll do it. Be the bad thing where someone in the comments will try to spin it as not the reality that we live in under some weird grocery store thin plastic bag logic. I've seen that. God, I've seen that so many times. Somebody just tries to make their version of the world their version of the world. So I'll be the bad guy. People quote me now. And Social Security benefits are one of those things where when a company does it, if we took let's just make up a company, Widgets Incorporated. If they created a Social Security system for their employees, where they force their employees to have to pay so much money and and then they got to take out bonds on behalf of them, that would be jail for the corporate business owners. That would be criminal. That would be a crime. When the government does it and forces you to have to pay into it, it's legal. So right off the bat, I've started to sit back and say to myself, is this program truly moral? And I think one of the questions we've got to ask ourselves is, if a private corporation did it the way the government did it, would we throw those people in jail that own that corporation? And I think the correct answer would be consistently, yeah, we would. Forcing people to take a pay cut and the company who pays them a pay ability cut. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then we basically, pay people, from future generation. I mean, it's the ultimate Ponzi scheme, except it's worse because you're forced to do it. Ponzi schemes, investors normally get to choose to make a mistake. Whereas this, you have no choice. So Social Security was based on trusting the government with money they probably should never have had access to. And hear me out with this whole situation. They put a bunch of safeguards up. Slowly, those safeguards were modified, which is like the opposite of the point of a safeguard, but it is what it is. But the idea was you pay money, not voluntarily, and they, at some point give you money back. Some of you will say, well, it's supposed to give me money back at 62. It's supposed to give me money back when I'm full retirement age 65. That's why I say we put safeguards in. and they keep modifying them. And the weird thing is, America would be going in the right direction if the retirement age kept getting younger and younger. Because that's the point. If you have $1 trillion super fund, a super slush fund, then you should be able to, with your $1 trillion super slush fund, make incredible investments, steer entire marketplaces. Makes sense, right? That's what these giant trust funds do in the private industry. And then from there, make the people who are the recipients of the benefits live a better life. Now, you can do that in many ways, right? You can, let's go with the basics here. We don't have to go way deep, but basics. You can increase their monthly amount. That's one way. You can reduce the age at which they can take the benefits. So instead of 62, it could be 60. Instead of 60, it could be 58. If America was such an all-star, such a first world country of first world countries, I mean, shouldn't we be at like retirement at 55 by now? Doesn't that make sense? If they made smart investments, wouldn't that make sense? It would, except the government doesn't want you to retire early. The government makes its money that they spend off of your work products, so the longer you work, the happier those politicians are. So, here's the thing. They put a bunch of safeguards up. They blew through them. They modified them. You pay money, not voluntarily. Then, they started with retirement. They added disability benefits. Then they added Medicare. And then they added SSI. Now, remember, when it was all created, the politicians didn't trust the politicians. And that's the best part of this whole thing. I don't know if you guys know this. I don't know if you know this. But when they sell you on the federal government being the thing that you should trust because it's backed by the federal government, that's a lie. Because they can't actually afford to pay it all because it's so big of a number. So there's no insurance company that's basically backing you to get your full check, which means 2032, 2033, the trust funds run out and you're shit out of luck. And there's no magical government fairy, let's call her, Fed Bell, that basically rocks in there and just puts money in your pocket. They are not able to cover their promise. Now, here's the thing. You guys know 1937, Supreme Court ruling, yada, yada, yada. They can change the program however they want, so long as they can get the votes to do it. It's a tax. That's all it is. Every time a politician goes, what we agreed to, what we promised the American people, it's an empty promise. If you watch the politicians giving that speech, they know they got a get out of jail free card because they can't be held to that promise because the Supreme Court ruled that they won't be held to it. So, like I said, retirement, disability, Medicare, SSI. Now, remember, when all this was created, the politicians didn't trust the politicians. They were more honest with you as politicians. That was when people trusted the government a little bit more. They were a little bit more upstanding, moral. We've had some Bidens, some Trumps, some Obamas, some Clintons, some Bushes since then, some Nixons. We've had some presidents that have reduced the likelihood of us ever believing them. I'm not bringing up Epstein. I'm not. Now, remember, they knew if the taxes went into the general fund and not being put away, that the politicians would spend it all. And Social Security would fail really quickly. They knew that. So what they did was they said in 1935 through 1937-ish area, we're going to put these funds into their special accounts. And that's the history. It's easy to read about it. Go look it up. But what's interesting about history is that Franklin D. Roosevelt had a very specific quote that tells us about the state of how he felt about the politicians getting access to these new funds that were being taxed from the people at 2%. He said, we put those payroll contributions there so as to give the contributors a legal, moral, and political right to collect pensions and unemployment benefits. With those taxes in there, no damn politician can ever scrap my Social Security program. Real quick. And this is before the Supreme Court really made a bunch of rulings on it, but there was supposed to be a legal, a moral, a political right. There was supposed to be this thing that would make Americans whole when they got old. How many of you feel whole now? Very few of you. Which is why I say to you now, the thing that will abolish, that will create a change of Social Security benefits as we know it, is the lack of monthly money. It's that you're not going to receive enough per month for you to believe in the program anymore. Now remember, all the votes are already there in the, under, I would say 45 to get rid of the program. The votes are there. The only question is, are the 45ers and up willing to do that and go with some different program? You see, we all got sold a lie because they promised something and then the Supreme Court ruled on it and said, well, we're allowed to modify this whole program whenever we want. The lie was to trust the government with the money, but not too much so that they could access the money. They said, look, you should trust us, we're the feds, but just in case we're not trustworthy, we're going to put it in this other account that the politicians can't use. Of course, they did change that. They took the funds, they put them into special interest bonds, and now they spend the money through special interest bonds. Now, again, they modified it. So 1935, the program is created. 1937, the trust funds are building in funds. 1939, they took the money and put it into special interest bonds since there was a surplus of money. It took them 4 years to raid the money. 4 years. That's all it took. 1935 to 1939. Just 4 years for them to actually raid Social Security as politicians. Let me go back to that quote real quick. Franklin D. Roosevelt, creation of Social Security. We put those payroll contributions there so as to give the contributors a legal, moral, and political right to collect their pensions and unemployment benefits. With those taxes in there, no damn politician can ever scrap my Social Security program. 4 years, they got their hands on the cookie jar. They started to play with the money by converting them into special interest treasury bonds. All right. So they did a bad thing. I'll be the bad guy tonight. So, okay. They've been using the money since 1939 to create bonds that ultimately had to be paid back by them nowadays printing and borrowing more money to pay back the interest on the bonds that they took out of the trust funds. Yeah. So they have I'm just going to say the golf balls, the basketballs, the banana balls to sell you that the money is safe. The government committed a fraud against the American people worse than Bernie Madoff, some would say, because Bernie kind of screwed over American investors and other investors around 70 to 20 billion dollars. 17 to 20 billion dollars. Well, over the next 75 years, the government, the super federal Madoffs in this situation, well, they basically are short to pay you $23 trillion. I don't even know how to express that to you. Like, that's a big number. It's like you talk about like how many stars there. That's like that. You talk about like how many cells in the body. $23 trillion short. Bernie Madoff could be a student of the federal government because he is nowhere near the level of crooked, modifying, theft, organized. And that's the thing. Bernie did it with a classic system of getting investors on board, and it's a pyramid scheme. Except when the government does it, it's an involuntary pyramid scheme sold that they love you and they're going to protect you and that the politicians won't be able to steal your money. Well, 23 trillion short over the next 75 years. Let's talk about some things to help you understand what 23 trillion means, okay? 1 million seconds equals roughly 11 and a half days. It's a lot of seconds. 1 billion seconds equals about 31.7 years. However, 1 trillion seconds, it's approximately 31,700 years. This is a period of time longer than the entirety of the human civilization. Basically, we didn't really exist in our current form. We were hominids. If you did 1 trillion seconds into years, and it would be 31,700 years. That's how big this number is. Except remember, that's only 1 trillion. We're talking about 23 trillion short. Let's talk about distance real quick so you understand this thing. A stack of $1 trillion bills would reach 67,866 miles into space. It's over a quarter of the way to the moon. If you laid $1 trillion bills end to end, they would stretch 96,656 miles further than the distance from the Earth to the sun. So now we're not stacking them, we're fitting them end to end. They would go further than our distance from Earth to the sun. Okay, let's talk about physical space. If you were to stack $100 bills to reach stack $100 bills to reach $1 trillion, the stack would be 631 miles high. $1 trillion in 100 bills would require 10,000 standard construction pallets, filling a football field with double stacked pallets. The average U.S. worker earning a median salary of $60,000 per year would need to work for 16 million years without spending a dime to accumulate $1 trillion. Not 23 trillion, just 1 trillion. An illustration of the U.S. national debt, which is nearing 36 trillion, it would take about enough NFL stadiums to hold the debt. If it were printed in $100 bills, the U.S. debt to GDP ratio is near record levels. Okay. So why do I tell you this? Because, just so you understand, while we're at 36 trillion in debt, we're going to be 23 trillion short. The government has no way to cover this money. There is no backed by the federal government. That's all BS. They can't afford it. They don't have it. They can't print and borrow anymore because they've hit 36 trillion in debt, which, to be honest with you, we're past the point of no return. The only hope now is to outgrow it by magically, I don't know, taking over more hyper-productive countries. We'll see if that happens. Now, with that said, if you like these videos and you like understanding what's actually going on, just Rude Rabbit said, my head, it's Saturday, math hurts. I get you. Please remember to like and subscribe because it helps this channel continue to grow. All right. Now, what do you think? We can tax the economy, growing population that makes money by buying more real estate and turning it into a business or making more products and selling this stuff. There's things that the government could do. The government could make money the way other people's make money. They could just make smart investments. They're going to have some bad ones in there, but they have so much money, they should be able to make a significant amount of money. Now, look, I know a lot of you want to tax the rich, and you can go for it. You can do what you want. your products and the rent are just going to get more expensive. The poor need the middle class because the middle class pay for these programs. Okay. And the middle class needs the rich because the rich make the jobs for the middle class. And it's weird. People are they've been mean to me because they act like, when I say these things like, oh, his education makes him an ass. Oh, he's such terrible. Oh my goodness. Oh no. And the weird thing is, to be fair, some of you are like, just because you have a college education doesn't mean that you're smart. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. I don't have just a college education. I have a master's and a doctorate and some postdoctorate stuff. And I don't do these videos to just freak you out. I do it so that you can go along the journey of Social Security with me. I am coming to conclusions myself about what we're going to do. Because at the end of the day, this is not going to work going forward. So let's go into it, okay? Imagine this situation. Let's go through some of this real quick, okay? We're working companies, right? We're companies and then employees that work with other companies, and then end users who buy products. We're basically farms, right? So if you look at like all these different companies, like a Walmart is a farm, right? You've got all the employees running around. Those are like farm animals. The people going and buying products, they're like farming. We're all on a farm. It's a farm. And the government basically takes its cut from the farm, okay? We all live in different paddocks, different counties. We live by different rules, different farms. What is it? It's a farm at the end. So let's visualize this thing out and understand how these farm animals would go ahead and deal with this situation. So what would a saved Social Security system look like for all these people trading services? We've got some milk over there. We've got some eggs over there. What would a fixed Social Security system look like for these individuals? Well, it would be funded, but it's got to be enough money each month to make sense. Right now, it no longer makes sense. Everyone is kind of pissed as to how small their check is. COLA doesn't keep up with the reality of how much things actually cost. Let's give it the impossible benefit of the doubt that the trust funds will remain funded no matter what. Let's just hypothetical say that the money is still going to come at 100% the check. Social Security will still fail because every year the amount of money becomes less and less because the cost of living adjustment doesn't keep up. So where is this tipping point where people throw up their hands and they say, enough, I give up, I'm over it? Well, let's look at this. If you had a 2.2 to 2.5% COLA increase, then 2024, your averages, retirement was $1,907, SSDI benefits $1,537, SSI is $700. Although remember, that's the average. That's not the full amount for SSI. Let's look at 2030. Okay, so we're 2025 right now. We fast forward to 2030. Just basically years before the thing collapses with the trust funds ending. Well, in 2030, the average retirement check will be around $2,216. The average SSDI check will be about $1,783. The average SSI check will be around $834. It doesn't work at that point. It doesn't work. We know before 2030, this program will no longer be able to supply people with enough money per month to basically make it make sense. Everybody at that point will be thinking about what's the better program we can have. Let's see how bad the train wreck gets, though. 2040 rolls around, the retirement check will be $2,837. 2040. So we're like way into the future now. SSDI is $2,284 in 2040. SSI is $1,031 in 2040. Obviously, in 2040, nobody will be able to survive on that per month. It's a logistical impossibility. But let's keep going. Let's see where this train wreck goes. 2050. In 2050, The average retirement benefit check will be $3,633. 2050. We're 2025 right now. We got to add 25 years. And the average retirement check will be $3,633. The average SSDI check will be $2,926. The average SSI check will be $1,275. Just imagine the average SSI check in 2050 being only $1,275. There's no way you would find rent in 2050 for an apartment for $1,275. There's no way. 2060, retirement amount, $4,656. And basically goes up $1,000 every decade. $4,656. SSDI would be $3,749, and SSI would be $1,576 in 2060. Impossible to live on that. You'll never find in 2060. You will never find a box that you can live in. Yeah, I mean, forget it. Forget the utilities. Forget all that stuff. You won't even be able to afford food on a full monthly basis for $1,576. Okay. 2075. In 2075, the average retirement check will be $6,789. The average SSDI check will be $5,470. The average SSI check will be $2,306. Program fails. Nobody wants it. Not enough money. Now, we get to the end of this whole thing, 2100. Although this has 2099. In 2099 or 2100, right? 2100. $12,152 for retirement. It's the average. $9,794 for SSDI. And SSI is $3,580 per month. So around 2100. Year 2100. Like, we have spaceships and we're going interplanetary. We're going to like the Andromeda galaxy. We're going places, right? The average retirement check will be just over $12,000. How would you survive on that in 2100? You wouldn't. All right. So by 2100, we will likely be a complete type 1 civilization. All right. We're 2025 right now. 2100 will be a type 1 civilization, which is like a 0.72 right now in 2025, but that's important. And there's these things: type 1 civilization, type 2 civilization, type 3 civilization. It's important to know this because if you don't know this, you don't know where society is going with essentially breakthroughs in technology. And each type of civilization is usually measured off of how much power or electricity we can create as an Earth, with all our civilization on other planets too, making power. So what is a type 1 civilization, right? 2100. Type 1 civilization can use and store all of the energy available on its home planet, including solar, wind, geothermal, tidal energy, fuels like gas, fuels like petrol, etc., heavy fuel, of full control over weather and natural systems, which obviously we're struggling with right now, seamless global energy coordination and sustainability, estimated energy output around 10, I think it's to the 16th watts or something, or 10 quadrillion watts. 10 quadrillion watts. Okay. We're nowhere near there right now, but that's a type 1 civilization. Okay. When we're at that point, it's just not going to make sense to have the current social security system that we do, because power is going to be largely harnessed. And we'll have artificial intelligence, we'll have robots, we'll have building machines. We should be able to create lots of apartments for people. And they really shouldn't have to be paying in a lot of money towards those apartments, which means the new system will be based on people endeavoring to be humans in humanistic ways. Now, let's talk about type 2. What is a type 2 civilization? And this is important because this will dictate where we will be as a civilization and then what that means for Social Security benefits going forward. All right, type 2. Estimated energy use, 10 to the 26 watts, included 100 billion times our current usage. Again, 100 billion times our current usage. Requires structures like a Dyson sphere or Dyson swarm, massive megastructures around the sun to capture solar energy. It implies advanced space infrastructure, asteroid mining, and near total control over the solar system. We might reach that around year 3000. Okay? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Then you have the type 3 civilization, the top civilization. This is where it's at. Energy use, approximately 10 to 36 watts, equivalent to the energy output of billions of stars in a galaxy like the Milky Way. It means having control over resources across hundreds of billions of stars. Such a civilization can build megastructures around many or all stars in their galaxy to capture and use energy, likely capable of galactic scale travel, communication, and possibly manipulation of space-time. We will likely achieve this 100,000, year 100,000 or year 1 million. Way out there, we'll all be passed away by then, so whatever, who cares, right? Okay. Social Security as a program will not exist as a type 3 civilization program. Social Security as a program will not exist as a type 2 civilization program. Social Security as a program will not exist as a type 1 civilization program. It won't. We'll get rid of it by then. Let's talk about this real quick, okay? Assuming, let's bump it up, an average of 3% annual inflation on typical expenses, moderate estimate. In 2024, the average cost of living for a person is around $70,000. Divided by 12 per month, it's around $5,833. 2030, it is expected that the average cost of living will be around $83,600. Divided by 12 per month, that gets you $6,966. In 2040, the average cost to live is around $94,200. Divided by 12 for per month, it's $7,850. 2044, $102,300. Divided by 12 per month, by 2044, it will take around $8,525 on average to live in America. That's a problem because if we go back to 2040, the average income to be able to live in America is an annual cost of living of $94,200 in 2040, which means for every month you have to earn $7,850. That is a bit larger of a number, $7,850, than realistically what your retirement benefits will equate to, which will be $2,837. Or SSDI of $2,284 or SSI $1,031. In other words, it becomes impossible to live on Social Security benefits due to the cost of living adjustments, which means that Social Security has to evolve in a big way. All right, let's look at the estimated average annual cost for retirees, right? So this is not just a person that's working and living. Annual cost for retirees. They usually set it out and they try to keep it out around, so 2024 average out is $55,000, right? That's the estimated average annual cost for retirees to exist in 2024. I don't know if you guys live on $55,000, but that's the number, that's the average. Now, 2030, it's expected to go up to $65,700. 2040, $87,800. 2044, $99,000. Now, let's assume for a moment that we go back to that retirement amount as to how much you'll get on that 2.2 to 2.5% cost of living adjustment. If you were looking at the estimated annual cost to be retired in 2030, It's expected to be $65,700 to live in America. Of course, it's more expensive in some places, cheaper in other, but that's the middle ground. But your retirement benefit for 2030 will only be around $2,216. So you'll be getting from retirement around $26,592, but the actual cost of living will be around $65,700. In other words, you will be getting half of what it actually costs to live in America. Another example would be 2040. At the 2.2 to 2.5 average COLA increase, 2040, you would get around $2,837 from retirement, totaling $34,044. If we look at the estimated average annual cost for retirees in 2040, it will cost you to live in America around $87,800. Again, that is $34,000 versus $87,000. You get less than half to be what the average retiree is currently utilizing right now. There's not enough. There's not enough. All right. So let's talk about this real quick. Historical background. I want you to understand why this happened. So in the 1970s, due to inflation, rising benefits, the demographic changes, a lot of welfare, Social Security system started facing financial strain. Okay. Because the country, like when people say welfare has nothing to do with Social Security, well, if you took the welfare money and you put it in investments to support the Social Security benefits, then yeah, welfare would have a huge impact on Social Security. But anyways, 1970s, the Social Security trust funds were facing financial strain. 1977, the Board of Trustees warned that somewhere in the early 1980s, the trust funds would deplete and the system would tailspin. 1981 and 1983, they put together a commission. Looming insolvency led to bipartisan reforms that now the current politicians, Biden, Trump, whoever replaces Trump as the next president, they keep promising you that they're going to get rid of this tax and this restriction. They're getting rid of all the 1983 restrictions that they used to try and make the trust funds last longer, which is just going to make the trust funds die sooner. Because 2033 is where they're saying they're going to go, but 2032, 2031, it's fair game. So when should we have privatized, either in a hybrid or a full privatization, the Social Security trust funds? Well, we would have had to do it before 1983, because in 1983 we would have run out of trust fund money. So that's when this was supposed to happen. We should have done it back then. Like some people are like, when do you think we should privatize Social Security? Before 1983. That's when we should have done it. We didn't, but we should have. But remember, we had a lot more trust and faith in the government back then. We were a lot more okay with politicians like taking this money from us. We were cooler with it back then, But also, to be fair, and this is an important one, this is a very important one, back then, they didn't tax us as much. Now, look. The historical FICA taxes, what we pay in Social Security taxes, the FICA tax rate increases over the years. Let me give you some historical reference here so that you know, okay? 1937 and 1939, there was a 2% tax, right? They just started the program. And basically, they did a 1% tax, and a 1% tax, but it was on the employer. There was only the employer paid a 2% tax when they paid you. That was it. Just a 2% tax when they paid you. Then in 1940 to 1941, the employee payroll taxes were introduced. So now the employer is paying a 2% tax, and the employee, when they get paid, is also paying a 2% tax. So now they were taxing you 4% in 1941. Then 1942 to 1948, They needed money for World War II. They increased it, okay, to 3%. Okay, so 3%, 3%, 6%. Then 1949 to 1951, they did post-war adjustments. That was a 3.5% now. All right, so 3.5% the employee pays when they get paid, and the employer pays out an additional 3.5% as well. So now we're at 7%. Okay. 1952 to 1953, they're trying to keep the trust funds looking good. They increase it to 4%. Now the employee is paying 4%, the employer is paying 4%. 8% of the money that you make at each check goes into Social Security. Okay. 1954 to 1956, we bump it up to 4.5%. Gradual increase. So 4.5 and 4.5, now we're at 9% paid out of taxes. 1957 to 1965, a 5% increase, 5% increase. Sorry, 5%, 5% is what they paid or what they took from you. So you're at 10% now. 1966 to 1981, 6.2%, plus 1.4% on top of that for Medicare, the hospital insurance. Okay. So just to be clear, you had 6.2% for the employee, 6.2% taxation to the employer, and then a 1.4% on top of that. All right. Then you had 1982 to 1990. Okay. 7.15%. Then 1991 to 1993, 7.65%. All right. So now you got basically 6.2% employer, 6.2% employee, and you got 1.45% that you're looking at for your Medicare, your hospital insurance. Currently, it is at 7.65%, okay, which was your 6.2 plus your 1.45 plus another 6.2% paid. So currently the tax is like around 15.3% that you pay at each check when you earn money in combination between you and the employer. I don't know about you, but like 15.3% of taxation to get that little money at the end of your life, that's not acceptable. Like we would fire everybody that gave us that option. So compare that 15.3% to 1937, where they did a FICA tax on the employee of just 2%. That was it, just 2%. So it went from 2% to 15.3%. So when people say we just need to raise the FICA tax, we need to put those people in a special box, and then we need to not allow them to go ahead and basically change our minds. We need to let them just sit and sauce over there and not be a part of the conversation, because those individuals do not understand that the working class can't afford any more increases. So here's the deal. Now we get through all of that. Now you understand it. It's a saucy situation, okay? As a result, people ask me, what point should we have gotten rid of Social Security? I say never. We should never get rid of Social Security. It's a great idea. It was just abused by politicians. At what point should we have privatized Social Security or done a hybrid privatized option? That would have been probably in the 1970s. That would have been the best time to really start making those moves. 1960s would have been better. 1950s, even better. But realistically, considering political pushes and where people were at, probably in the 1970s. At what point should we now do a hybrid program of government-run trust fund and basically a quasi-privatized trust fund as well to help support Social Security benefits? That would be right now, immediately. The moment we take our next breath, that moment, we should be doing it. So here's the thing. Let's say that we did this, and instead we had like a very moderate, not doing great, privatized Social Security trust funds. Like, what would that pay somebody? So at the end of the day, if that person was allowed to have that money in an account, right? Like a privatized account where you owned it, when you reached retirement at 67, if it wasn't, great investments, it was just average, whatever, it's just regular stuff, then you would have $1.2 million sitting in an account. 1.2 million for you when you hit 67 years old. Not a great amount, not a lot of money. Okay. And that's with not great investments, right? That's the privatized system not doing spectacular or even very good or even good, just middle. So bottom line is, if we use a 4% withdrawal rate, okay, what we're looking at is around $48,000 per year. Okay. Total is about $4,000 per month. So my point to you is this. If the average Social Security retirement check is $1,907, and a midline privatized Social Security check totals $4,000, it is more than double. And that's with not good returns. That's like junk returns in the private market. So to me, I believe Social Security will not hit 2030 without it being a hybrid model. That is what I've calculated, because at this point, it does not make sense for retired people, disabled adult child people, widows benefit people. It doesn't make sense for any of these people to get this small of a check after paying this much in over their life. Now, politically, let's talk about votes, because that's what's going to happen with this. You already have the people who are under 45 ready to vote away the program and just go to full privatized, because they know if you make smart investments, if you got 15.3% back, right, per month, you could, that's a mortgage right there. You know what I mean? That's a mortgage for a lot of people right there. That amount, you could get a low mortgage on something. You could get a small piece of land with that. All right. So the point is this, okay? Let's say all the people under 45 are realistically a large percentage ready to vote away the program. Then you still have those over 45. 45 to 50, 50 to 60, 60 to 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, so on and so forth. The question then becomes, at what point does a 60-year-old, 70-year-old, 80-year-old, 90-year-old vote to hybridize this program? I believe it will happen over the next 5 years. I do not think Social Security will make it in its current form to 2030. I believe that the reason that this will happen is that the American people who are about to receive the check or who are already receiving the check will be receiving so little that they will be desperate to find some alternative option. Now, what the politicians are saying is that they will have the U.S. Treasury write out a loan of, let's say, $1.5 trillion. And that $1.5 trillion will then be invested into a privatized market series to go ahead and make more money. Some of you believe that private investment is a terrible idea. You'll still have the regular trust funds, so, you'll be fine with what you like. But I think we can all agree that since the United States government can't back the problem that they have, because the trust funds are going to run out and they can't afford to keep them going, that belief that we are letting the government do a smart thing for us, that belief is over. They mismanage the funds. They didn't invest them properly. They converted them into special interest treasury bonds. They spent that money. And when the time came to pay back the interest due on those bonds, they printed and took out additional loans to pay it back, thereby devaluing the dollar, the same dollar that you all, including myself, allowed them to snooker. So, what's going to happen? We just have to wait for those people who are 45 and older, somewhere around there, to wake up and realize that they live the life, the standard of living that they live, because they keep putting politicians in control of something that was never supposed to be in control, at least financially, by these politicians when it comes to using money that you were supposed to access and they were not. I quote Franklin D. Roosevelt one last time. We put those payroll contributions there so as to give the contributors a legal, a moral, and a political right to collect their pensions and unemployment benefits. With those taxes in there, no damn politician can ever scrap my Social Security program. All right, everybody, please remember, if you enjoy these videos, like and subscribe. Head over to Google, type in Disability Resolution Law Firm. If you want to add some stars there, please go ahead. With that said, I go live on Mondays and Thursdays. Sometimes I fall asleep at night, so I don't get to go live and answer questions for free about disability law. America's most viewed, clicked, and subscribed to Disability Attorney. I will be going live tonight to answer questions for free. It's not going to be the next video, it'll be the video after that. Also, I don't do Medicare stuff. That's not my gig. That's not my legal area. If you have Medicare questions, if you want to get a tune-up on your, Medicare options and programs, bottom line is just give Chapter a call. I've worked with them to go ahead and look at their systems, and they basically have a great setup, massive company. They have access to all these different programs. So let them do a tune-up if you want. Let them check into it. Give them a call. Phone number 339-226-6287 or askchapter.org/disability. I'm always terrible with calling my insurance companies and making them fight to give me the best deal. I'm always bad at that. I'm trying to get better at that. You can be better at that by giving them a call and letting them it's free. It's literally for you. It's you don't have to pay them, and they look at all the programs they got. Simple. All right, I will catch you all a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful night, but I will be back in about 10 minutes for the next video where we'll be talking about an SSI recipient who got hard time for abusing the SSI benefits. Catch you soon. We'll rock and roll from there. Attorney Walter Hnot, and thank you so much. All right, bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.